Hello everyone, welcome to the LookingGlass Bright Talk presentation on phishing prevention. Be suspicious and don't get hooked. I'm here today with Greg Ogorek, Senior Director for Cybersecurity Operations with LookingGlass, and I'll be speaking with you today, James Carnall, Vice President of with the Cybersecurity Center. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
So let's go through an overview of what we'll be talking about today. So as part of the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we thought it would be a good idea to go back to some of the basic topics, and one of the ones that we've chosen to talk to you about today is phishing. So I'll go through the agenda. We want to talk to you today about why are we still talking about phishing? It's a big one. What the size of the problem is, the cost of phishing, why do phishing attacks still work, and who are the actors and what are their motivations, what types of phishing attacks are out there and exist, the alphabet soup of phishing, and what are some of the things you can do to protect yourself. So again, Greg, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll get going. So I've highlighted the APWG report here for the first quarter of 2016. There are a couple of very interesting facts in that. They said that the phishing has increased within that period by 250%. They said that retail services was an industry that was targeted, and they saw an increase about 42% for that sort of attack area. They said targeted brands was somewhere around the 406 to 430, and they said that the United States was one of the areas where most of the websites were hosted. Apparently, from an infection point of view, China, Taiwan, and Turkey were the things they highlighted in their report. So, again, why are we seeing this increase in phishing?
Well, we're members of APWG, and it's something that we talk about every time we get together. Phishing is still a problem because it's cheap and easy to perform. The bad guys have automation tools that let them perpetrate the crime without a lot of effort. Lots of people still fall for these scams. They're still making money, so they're still going to perform the attacks and try to steal that information from people. Some of the other things that are contributing to phishing's and its increase and its prevalence in today's society is the fact that more and more brands are coming online, right? More companies are standing up services where they're providing account management and storing consumer information on their platforms. So when they do that, they become a target because bad guys want that information, right? The number of platforms that we're engaging with, places like Facebook, and Twitter, and our online banking, and our online rewards point management stuff, and our online shopping accounts. We have all of these websites where we're engaging in an authoritative way, right? Performing actions and transactions online. So there's more places for a message to come to us from that could be faked and spoofed with all kinds of new ideas like, oh my gosh, your account has been compromised. Please log in now to secure it.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? There's more usernames and passwords than ever because
even
the simplest of programs require that you have a username and password, right?
Yep, and it has to be a good one. They all have to be good.
And the rule set of the password is different, right? Some are 8 characters, some you can use special characters, some you can use phrases. They're not consistent in that regard either.
No, but no matter what those sites require of you, though, people still tend to use the same password among all their platforms. So that's another problem that we see in the industry, because once you give up one password, you're essentially giving up your access to a lot of different platforms that you use.
So that password 123, always a good one, right?
No.
Okay. So let's talk about the cost of phishing. Again, this is a difficult thing to quantify, just because, of course, financial institutions have obviously some areas where they write off finances to fraud, right? They've got some losses. We've got a lot of organizations out there that they're probably being phished for the first time that aren't necessarily reporting it officially or required to disclose that sort of amount.
If their state doesn't require it by law, right?
Right. We've got, the training cost of getting your employees, the machine. Talk about some of the effects of phishing, the soft and the hard, the tangible, the non-tangible costs.
Well, one of the articles that, we see all the time is on the slide now, and the idea that, a company can incur a cost of $3.7 million annually due to phishing. It doesn't really matter what that number is. The point is there are costs like you've outlined. When an organization or an employee at an organization is phished, that opens them up to all types of opportunities for bad actors to have access to the internal network, Network breaches that we hear about in the news usually occur because somebody was phished within the organization. Mm-hmm. So, if you're a financial institution, you have costs of insurance to help cover your losses from phishing losses, from compromises of accounts.
Which is a cost itself.
Which is a cost itself.
Right.
But you're also incurring costs like negatively affected brand reputation, right? Mm-hmm. Your consumer confidence level goes down. Mm-hmm. And if you're a financial institution, the last thing you want to do is have people lose confidence in online banking and start coming back to the branch. You have to hire more tellers. You have to be open longer hours. You have to build more brick and mortar branches to support that. If you're an online shopping environment, right, sales can go down, right, because people lose confidence in transacting with you. Mm-hmm. So you incur costs from just, the soft costs of the brand reputation. Plus, if you have employees who get compromised, you're incurring costs in training those employees and how not to fall for it again. Mm-hmm. You're paying for outside firms to come in and secure your networks and clean it up and find the holes and patch your servers and recover stolen data and lost data. So there's a lot of extra costs involved in an organization, big or small, mm-hmm. When phishing is the point of a problem that you're experiencing.
So we don't have one centralized reporting for phishing losses and costs. It's not official across the board, is it?
No, I mean, there's a lot of different organizations that keep some stats. Mm-hmm. Most of these sites, they'll just do surveys. They'll call organizations that get heavily phished and they'll ask them some basic questions about what kind of costs they incur.
So again, if you're interacting with individuals online, you have a username, password, or some sort of program where you're storing personal data, you're likely going to be a target, and there's likely going to be some cost.
I would expect you to be a target since it's so easy to perform a phishing attack. It doesn't really cost a lot mm-hmm. to pick out a new organization that is now storing private information and to become a target.
So let's talk about now why phishing attacks still work. Right? I mean, again, we've known about this for some time. You've obviously been in the industry for some time. Let's talk about some of the levers that people play on to make these successful attacks. Let's talk about what phishing is first, and then let's go into how those levers can be manipulated.
Well, phishing, for the sake of our conversation, is essentially where a bad actor will impersonate an entity of authority, whether it's your bank or social media platforms or online shopping. And send messaging with the intent to steal information from people, mm-hmm. right? So, this slide talks about the elements of rhetorical persuasion, right? This is how our brain works. Scientists have done plenty of studies on how our brains interact with our environment, how we respond to outside stimuli, how we make decisions, right. How we rationalize, how we decide. And so, phishers will use this same science, right, mm-hmm. In order to perpetrate social engineering. Mm-hmm. They'll learn how to hack your brain. So if they know how your brain functions, like we can all understand through pop psychology and other studies, they can use the same knowledge to learn how to tweak a message to get you to act. Mm-hmm. And they'll use things like authority, urgency, a sense of urgency. You have right. to act now. You have to act now because I'm an important person in your life, like the IRS or your bank. Mm-hmm. You have to take action immediately because there's going to be a consequence, so there's fear involved. Right. All these different elements that they pull on, these strings, to get you to behave in a certain way.
Very interesting. So again, you mentioned pressure or sort of urgency, the need for something to be done quickly that tends to allow people to excuse process and procedure, policies, things like that.
Oh yeah, you'll forget about simple things like taking a breath and counting to 10, but you'll quickly click on a link and give up your login information if you think your account's compromised and you have to secure it right away.
Right.
So
very good. All right, so let's talk about the scope of the problem. I think one of the things that here at LookingGlass we have this threat map, and it always amazes me when people come through and look at it, that they're sort of like, well, I would expect to see more in Africa and China and Russia, based on where threat actors are and what I heard or read in this report. And I'm surprised to see so many of the phishing malware attacks hubbing around westernized nations or more sophisticated nations in regards to infrastructure.
Well, yeah, and a map like this kind of highlights the multiple facets of what's going on with a phishing attack. it's true that you may have a bad actor sitting in some other country in Africa or Eastern Europe or even Australia, and perpetrating. You're welcome. Perpetrating an act, but they want to use platforms from Western civilization to be able to host those environments. A map like this shows dots in countries where there are a lot of servers per capita, right? A lot of infrastructure, a lot of high bandwidth internet connectivity.
Right.
So if there are more servers, it's more likely that more of those servers are going to be compromised. So they attack those servers, they find weaknesses, they leverage themselves into those boxes to host content, to host scripts that steal the data once you've given it up. They'll use Western country resources to perpetrate the acts because that's where all the hardware is.
Right. So the bigger the pipes, faster, more sophisticated the machines.
Yeah.
You know, the more likely. Okay. And one of the reports that your group typically produces in regards to an industry overview of phishing targets. Again, you mentioned this, I think, in the previous slide that you know, more people have more sites that we need to log into. I mean, we're moving away from traditional banks. You know, why do we rob banks? That's where the money is, right? But we're collecting information, user accounts. To your point, we're reusing usernames and passwords. So we collect it wherever we can. Is that sort of why we're seeing this sort of attacks move into these other industries?
Well, yeah, it's gone from just, you know, bad guys wanting to rob gold bullion, right, to stealing private information. There's a lot more value in stealing someone's social security number and their private information, their health information, you know, whatever it takes to be able to leverage a greater attack, right? They can leverage that information to tailor future messages for a much bigger play.
Right.
They can also sell that information on the black market, right? There's a whole underground economy involved in dealing with stolen data from phishing attacks.
Right. So, and again, that sort of relates to why we're seeing the spread into other industries for targeting for Phish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so one of the things before we move into getting into the different types of phishing attacks, the alphabet soup, I like for the naming there. I think it's important for us to talk about how we look at actors and motivations. So again, if you see this slide, we've sort of broken it down into three main groups, and I'll sort of touch on that a little bit. One is organized crime, or obviously criminals. They're typically the easiest to profile because they're after money, right? They're typically after money, or they're after items that they can sell to earn money. That's typically their motivation there. So again, one of the more simple there. Hacktivism, again, activists, they're out there to either embarrass, ruin the reputation of an organization, or to influence some sort of change in policy, whether it's a company they don't want to invest in this type of activity, whether it be fracking or some sort of other environmental issue. It could be they don't want you to invest in that bank, so they attack somebody in the supply chain. So again, some motivation to move based on a belief. And then the third is the nation-state attack. So again, we're typically here, we're after IP, we're after information that allows us to build the next strike fighter, or to understand how this new diesel engine works more efficiently, or electric car technologies, whatever it is that they can steal from you so they can leverage it to improve their own position. One of the things we don't have here is insider trader, right? Somebody who is, an insider who is stealing information from you, that insider threat. But we think that sort of connects with these three buckets in some way, right? They're either motivated by money, so that's more criminal activity. They're motivated by ideology, so they realize that after working for the company, they don't believe in some policy or something that you've done, so therefore they attack you and pull information out for that reason, or they're being contacted or solicited in some way for espionage for a nation state. So, again, as we go through these other types of phishing attacks, they can be, the motivation of why these attacks are happening can be sort of boiled into these three categories. So with your years of experience in phishing, Greg, we wanted you to sort of go through some of the basics here in regards to how it all started. So we have here a simple sort of example. Would you like to talk us through?
Yeah. Well, back in the day when I was at AOL, phishing really became a prominent concern, right, in the industry. Back then, phishing was simple. The emails were all text-based. The messaging was full of grammatical errors and misspellings. So on the good side, it was simple to detect, right? Because you could look at that and say, no one would ever speak that way. A large company would never, send out a mass email with that many errors in it. That should be a dead giveaway. But the methodology was the same, right? I mean, it's still sending an email, it's still sending a URL, it's still attempting to leverage social engineering to get someone to fall for a ruse and to give up their private information.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, of course, it's gotten more sophisticated. The messaging has gotten cleaner.
Right.
But even back in the day, they would use a domain name, that was similar, right? It would, screen name hyphen something or other membership dot, dash AOL.com.
Right.
Not a legitimate domain, but in the 90s, I mean, did a consumer understand things about domain names and their structure and what was legitimate or not?
Right, and we're talking something you can buy for about $13, right?
Well, yeah, and even then it doesn't cost you anything because you're probably using a stolen credit card to buy your domain
there you go.
as a Fisher. So
you get as many AOL domains as you like, right?
Right. But they were even back then they were still using fake domains in order to trick you. They were still using a fake email address to make the email look like it came from somebody legitimate, in order to trick you. So those tactics have been around for a very long time.
Right. All right, so let's talk about financial phishing.
The basic fundamental form of phishing is, your financial institution being the point, the target of a phishing attack.
Right.
The classic idea is that there's something wrong with your account, or a transaction didn't go through, or we are going to wire money from your account as you've requested unless you click here to cancel it.
Right.
So again, it's using all those tactics to
changing your credit level, right?
Yeah. They want to encourage you to act without thinking and quickly click on a link and go visit the page.
Right.
But in addition to the traditional form of phishing attack through email, there's also this malicious attempt at gathering information from you, because you can log into your bank by manually entering the URL and go to log into your online banking. And back in a few years ago, there was cross-site scripting, which was an exploit in a common web server that would allow an attacker to inject additional fields within a web form. But you can also do that through infecting a local computer with malware that allows you to perform what we call a man-in-the-middle attack. Right? So you can log into your banking website and you can see your username and password field, but an infected computer might also show you a few additional fields, like your credit card numbers, your PIN number, the 3 digits in the back of your code, of your card. These additional fields, and then all of those fields, then when you hit the submit button, get sent to the bad guy.
Right.
And then you're continuing on and logging into your bank, and you don't even know something happened.
Right. So it seems like a legitimate login. Maybe a couple of extra questions are asked.
Sure.
But you still get to your bank account. You're still in and seeing that.
Right. So the victim has a smaller chance of recognizing that something happened. So when occurrences like this happen, you want to make sure that you're familiar with your online banking process. Right. When you're talking about banks and credit unions specifically, what does that login page look like? What information does it ask of you? And if it suddenly changes one day and asks more additional information, more private information, you should, once again, take a second, right? Count to 10 and wonder, why does this form have to ask me this information? And by all means, take an extra step and call the bank and ask them if the login process has changed on the website. Right. Confirm it. It's changed. It's something new. You should be suspicious enough to take a moment, take a breath, make a phone call, and confirm it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. So again, like the image you have here where there's a couple of extra fields on that, if you're not expecting those and you haven't deliberately said, hey, I want to change my password, or I've forgotten it, right, that walks you through a different process. But if you log into that screen and see a couple of extra fields there, maybe you should be suspicious, right, and dial the number on the back of your card or something like that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, very good. All right, so let's talk about the business email compromise, a big scam that's in the press right now. I think some of the elements of this that make it very interesting that it's more of a spearfish. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but they're targeting organizations with a certain amount of information, but they're sending emails that don't have a link in it, so they're not requiring that you click on a link. and they're not asking you to go to a website, obviously, to fill in information. What they're typically doing is making requests internally to HR departments for W-2 information, or they're reaching out to the accounting group or maybe a partnership group for wire transfer information. How does this sort of fit in, and what are some of the ways that we could protect ourselves against this type of threat?
Well, this type of an attack is very similar to other phishing attacks in the sense that they'll use email, they'll spoof the from address to make it look like it came from an authoritative entity. If you're HR, it might come from your bank or your payroll processing environment. If you're an employee, it might come from your own HR department or look like it did. Mm-hmm. So the idea is, and if it's a vendor, changing their routing number for wire transfers to pay for invoices, and they make the email look like it came from those organizations and those entities. So in essence, they're again impersonating an authoritative entity in an attempt to steal private information. Now, the difference with this type of an attack is they're not, like you said, they're not asking you to click on a link and give up a login information, but they are asking you to send documents or other pertinent information that is company proprietary, mm-hmm. or even confidential. So you want to do things like, again, take a moment, count to 10. Right. Why is HR asking me for my information, or why is the vendor changing their routing number? Pick up the phone and make a phone call. Right. An organization should have, as part of their process for transacting in sensitive information and money, mm-hmm. A process of pick up the phone and make a phone call to confirm, right, to double check. Right. If it's the CEO emailing the executive assistant saying, hey, I'm stuck in London and I need you to wire funds to me, there should be a simple process of, you need to call my wife, you need to call another executive, mm-hmm. You need to call somebody else to confirm my state. Right, before you just go and wire a tremendous amount of money. So taking those steps will help ensure that you don't give up private information, and you're doing the right thing before you execute.
And I think you and I talked a little bit about this before in regards to that sending email and that reply email being different. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. When you these emails that come in, they're going to make the email look like it came from either your organization or some authoritative organization outside. And when you click on the reply to, uh-huh. right, to send your reply, they can spoof that as well. But you want to be able to inspect those email addresses to make sure that they're legitimate. Right. Those are just some ways that you can protect yourself.
But as part of this too, it's just the suspicion of it, right? Why am I getting this request? Is it a usual request? Maybe the wire transfer number changing. I mean, that's it. I mean, one of the things that I've heard is put that into the contract, or put it in something where it requires some real movement to change things like that within your internal process. Again,
you're putting in roadblocks from a single person taking action to do a single task, right. that has a greater impact. Right. I'm part of my local PTA, mm-hmm. and just last week, my treasurer texted me and said, hey, did you send me an email asking about wiring funds? And I replied, no, I did not. Right. She showed me the email, and then the email itself had my name on it, but right. the email address underneath it was some different address. Okay. And the messaging was just a simple request, hey, Lisa, are you able to wire funds? Right. And it signed my name. It was a bit disturbing, mm-hmm. But the great thing was we had a process in place that, nothing gets transacted financially within the organization unless 2 or 3 people are aware of what's going on. Right. So just for her to be able to know that she would never reply to that no matter what, even if it was legit, she would always reach out by text. She would always contact one of the other vice presidents to make sure that that's helpful, right? And that just kind of reduces the opportunity for a mistake to happen because one person fell for one issue and did one act that caused great harm.
Well, and in that, right, you may have your phone number published, or you may have certain information published. So if somebody replied to that email and said, hey, did you send this to me? And they used a number that was out there in the public already. There's ways, these can be very sophisticated. So to your point, it's agreeing on what the transaction looks like. The fact that Lisa wrote back to you essentially and said, probably not using that email, but another one because of course it wasn't yours, is a really good point. And again, I think we sort of use this term sneaker net as well. which is just get out of your seat and walk down the hall, right?
Yep.
If it's in your business.
Put your sneakers on and go talk to somebody.
Right.
You know, face-to-face communication is so difficult nowadays.
Yeah. Well, you know, we're everything's moving so quickly, right? It's one of those challenges. Okay, so let's talk about spear phishing.
Spear phishing is it's just one of those methods of phishing, right? We've coined these terms to make more sense of the different styles of attack. Okay. In spear phishing, you know, just imagine, you know, you're hunting with a spear, right? You're going after a group in the hopes that you're going to get one. With spear phishing, you're sending an email to all the employees at a company with a message that is relevant and timely for that organization, especially if that organization has a lot of news. You know, it's very easy to craft a message if, you know, if the company had recent security breaches. They're most likely going through training for cyber safety awareness, right? So a bad actor could actually craft a message about the company's efforts to do training for cyber safety awareness.
Right.
And the message itself could be a way, it's true, it's timely, has credibility, and it provides a link for someone to click on and give up their information.
And the risk of this, unlike the first fish you talked to us about, where it's strafed out to a
big broad, shotgun blast.
These tend to have things, as you say, for going back to that pyramid, they have things that maybe logically make sense. I would expect to get an email like this from the training group or from HR. I would expect to have my name in it. I would expect to have other information, maybe my boss referenced in the email. So it's all pulling that stuff in to give it credibility. But as you say, it's a certain company or group that's being targeted with it.
Right. And the messaging will always have, you know, those common elements, right? It'll be somebody of authority requiring something very important. The consequences are going to be disastrous, and you must act now. Right? If you feel fearful reading an email, and that fear is causing you to feel like you must act immediately,
right,
chances are it's not legitimate.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And in previous conversations you and I had at different times is about the business culture, right? To sort of embrace as part of the policy and procedure, to encourage people to have the freedom to go and talk to their superiors if they think something's suspicious.
Well, yeah, and when we talk about whale fishing, right? You have, this is the concept where you have individuals of high net worth, or folks who have access to very sensitive or highly sensitive information within an organization.
Right.
There has to be that culture, like you're saying, of an executive assistant or an individual contributor in the organization. If they get an email from the CEO asking for certain sensitive information, there has to be that culture of you're allowed to ask questions without punishment. Right? You're allowed to get out of your seat and go knock on the door and say, did you actually send me this email? Are you asking me to provide this information? Again, take a second, breathe, count, put your shoes on and go for a walk.
Right.
But there has to be that culture internally to encourage folks to ask questions first, and it should never be the wrong thing to do.
Right, and it's probably not the policy of most businesses to say that a wire transfer needs to go through by the end of business today, you know, type thing, right? I mean, there's usually some sort of barrier and buffer to make sure things like that don't
It's
happen.
business. We're always in a hurry,
right?
There's always going to be a need to get something done quickly, but like again, you should never have that culture where if you ask questions that you're penalized, because we can't let our inherent need to quickly get business done be the cause of us doing something wrong. Right? So yeah, we're all going to be in a hurry. We're all very busy. Everything has to be done yesterday. Just don't let that be the cause of you doing something that can cause harm to the organization because you didn't take an extra step to confirm it.
So with whale phishing, I mean, a lot of businesses now are investing pretty heavily on social media accounts for their executive level, maybe the board, right? There's a big push now to have people be more approachable, for people to feel like they actually know who's running these businesses and organizations. All of that additional information out there that's out there in the open source, essentially out there online, allows sort of whale phishing and other attacks to be a little bit easier to action than they would have been in the old days.
Well, yeah, I mean, being an executive in modern day public companies, even, the amount of private information that's widely available You know if they had vacation homes in certain areas. You know, you could fabricate messaging about, you know, problems with those properties. There's all this information that bad actors have access to, and then they would use those as part of their messaging again to just drive up credibility, right? And to lend that truthfulness to the messaging, but it's still all the same types of messaging. It's still social engineering. It's still something bad is going to happen if you don't act now.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's the value of this whale, right, that they're capturing, and that term sort of comes from
Vegas.
Yeah,
for the high rollers that come into town.
Dick, then. Right?
No whales.
Oh, right.
Not that kind of
whale. But they're so, you know, either wealthy or they have so much influence or have so much access that it's worth. You could almost be relentless, like you said. You could use their rental property. You could use a conference they're speaking at. You could essentially keep a relentless attack at every vector you could think of in regards to the information that's out there to try and get to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. All right, so, you know, I didn't have my bingo card ready, but you've got another bit of vocabulary for us here. We've got the Vishing and SMShing.
Vishing and SMShing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you know, given enough time, more intelligent people will coin more new words as the threat types continue to evolve over time. But Vishing or voice phishing, VoIP phishing, voice over IP, internet telephony, this concept and SMShing came from, you know, text messaging. These are efforts where, you know, you're using either text messaging or still using email as a form of communicating to a potential victim. But the hook is you're asking them to call a number.
Right.
And so you're not asking them to go to a website and fill out a form that they're now, if they've listened to this webinar, are fully informed about how not to do that. But now you're calling a phone number, responding to an urgent, authoritative request for immediate action. Otherwise, dire consequences will occur.
Right.
Right. But now you're calling somebody. You know, how well do you know your phone number for your bank? Or the IRS, or anybody else in your life, right? So you're being forced to make a phone call, and that person's telling you there's a problem, and they're asking for private information to confirm who you are because you're the one calling them,
right?
Or you're just calling a number and you get interactive voice response, IVR, right? It's the machine says, please enter your credit card number, please enter your PIN, please enter the 3 digits after your, the back of your card, and it's like.
And then it hangs up.
Like, well, it must be all solved.
You think that's, because we're so trained by banks, right, to provide a certain amount of information so they can make the call more efficient.
Right.
That we would logically say, well, maybe that is what I should be doing, and maybe that is what I should enter.
Well, it is my credit card that's a problem, so maybe they need all my digits.
Right.
So, yeah, it's hard for consumers, I think, to keep track of all the types of data we shouldn't be giving people. Because banks say, oh, we'll never ask for your PIN number. But the first thing you do when you go to a bank is you enter your PIN number on a little touchpad at the counter to confirm who you are. So does the person at the counter, the consumer, realize that the teller doesn't know what that number is? I mean, maybe not.
Right.
They're entering it at the bank, so the bank must want it. So when they're asked for it over the phone, are they going to pause? Probably not. Not when they're right now in the moment fearful of having a transaction occur that they didn't want,
right?
Or having an account closed, or some other problem that caused them to call.
Check bounce or something like that.
Right.
So from a Vishing and SMShing point of view, what can people do in regards to these two things? What's the real help that we can provide?
I mean, the best advice you can offer anybody is if somebody's telling you to call them, get the number for them on your own. If it's your bank or a credit union, call the number on the back of your card. Right. If it's, PayPal or the IRS, whatever, go to those websites and get the number off the websites. Don't trust the messaging as the authority in your life, and just call the number that they're sending you.
Right. Good recommendation there. All right. So let's talk about technical support phish. Right. It's an area that's growing in as a tactic that's being used more prevalent. Being used in the marketplace a lot more aggressively these days.
Oh, you mean the phone call I got last week saying that one of my computers at home was infected and they needed to fix it for me right away?
That's right.
Was not real?
And you asked which one of the 12 it was?
It's funny. I do like getting those calls every once in a while, because then I tend to ask, it's like, which computer is it that you're calling about? Oh, it's the Windows computer, and right then I know it's not me. But it's this idea that someone's calling you to tell you that something in your house is infected and causing harm somewhere else. Mm-hmm. No one wants to have their computers infected. No one wants to be the reason why somebody else is experiencing a problem. Right? That's self-protection, that's the do-gooder, that's all these triggers in your brain. You want to get that fixed right away, and oh my goodness, someone actually called me and is willing to do it for me for free, or even worse, to charge me. Mm-hmm. Right? So you accept the premise of what they're calling on, and the first thing they want to do is install software on your computer, and have remote access to your computer, and who knows from that point on what they'll do to your computer, and install on there to leverage for other nefarious acts. Mm-hmm. Nobody on the planet is monitoring networks and calling consumers to legitimately fix their computers. There's no money in it. Unless, well, the good guys can't make money on it because no one's going to spend $50 for the call, right? But the bad guys will get a whole lot more than that from you for no cost up front.
Well, and they can also, from a demographic point of view, they can build a circle and say, okay, well, this is an area that's serviced by Cox, this is an area that's serviced by Comcast or DirecTV or, whatever, and they can basically call and say, well, no, I'm not subscribed to that service. Okay, great. Check. I know the other provider in the area is the other one. I'll call you back next week and try that one, right?
Yep. Well, again, they're going to be impersonating an authoritative figure, right? Mm-hmm. Your network provider that you're used to dealing with. And oh my goodness, they're calling me because they care. Right.
Your FiOS is down. You need to do this immediately, right?
Yeah. Reboot your cable modem for me, please, and tell me what the password is on the back.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and again, this tactic is now sort of branched out into social media. Websites are out there. Again, people are registering domains and then putting it in the sponsored ads of Google and what have you. So it's not always just calling the phone number. There's other ways that they're trying to trick you into navigating. So if you type in the keyword, Verizon modem help, it sort of moves into that. So,
yeah.
So what some of the things we can do to help sort of solve these problems from a technical support? So we get a phone number or somebody calls us.
Yeah, if you get an email message with a phone number, say call me, you can look up that phone number on a variety of phone number tracking scam websites to see if other people have reported that number as being a scammer. You can spend time Googling it. You can spend the time researching the numbers. But if it's an organization that you deal with on a regular basis, go to the source and get the right number. Mm-hmm. Don't trust the messaging that's coming at you.
Very good. All right, so let's talk about ad phishing and clickjacking. So, in regards to some of the issues that we've seen here, is again using well-known brands to try and trick people into again providing personal information, filling out surveys, trying to get some sort of benefit, maybe a card, right, a gift card.
Well, yeah, how much you're going to give up for a $50 gift card?
Right.
That may never come.
Right. But again, there's two areas to this. One is distracting you away from the Google ad. So again, you might be an advertiser with a legitimate brand. They put out an ad in the ad section. They're moving traffic away from your legitimate sites, maybe so they can run it through their sites and then back to you. Or we've got phishing that can occur by me providing you information to get that gift card that I may or may not ever get.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about leveraging those brands, right, to drive credibility.
Yeah.
If you think it's the real people, when you click on an ad for, in this example, Heinz ketchup, and you fill out a survey for a year's worth of ketchup.
That's a lot of ketchup.
It's a lot of ketchup.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, how much information would you give for a year's worth of ketchup?
Yeah, I guess you could love the ketchup.
Yeah. So, but even if it's a legitimate survey by some third-party organization, you're still left with the impression that your information is going to the ketchup maker.
Right.
Why would you want that to begin with? But how do you even know it's going there? Mm-hmm. And what are they doing with that information? And where is that information being stored and kept forever? Mm-hmm. So, be careful, be aware of where you're providing your information, what information you're providing.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is in shopping, in times of the year where shopping is a priority, right? Beware of these programs where, $100 gift card for providing a little bit of information, a survey is probably not realistic, right? Maybe $15, but even then, to your point, how much is it worth to get $15 to give all this information away? Maybe you shouldn't do it in the first place.
Absolutely. It's just keeping your information more, closed up, right? Keeping it private.
So let's talk about malware-based phish.
Well, that's where malware turns just absolutely evil by attaching itself to phishing, right? If you've got a standard phishing attack, the bad actors hoping that people will click on the links and go to a website and provide their login information. But let's just ensure that we get as much bang out of this buck as we can as a bad actor, and let's attach malware to the email. Maybe the messaging is, the credit card hasn't gone through for your order online. Check this invoice to make sure it's complete and provide new information. Well, you open up the document and it's an infected document.
Right.
Or the link that they provide you goes to a website. Not only do they ask you private information, but they're also infecting your computer with a drive-by download so that they can get more benefit out of that single click,
right?
That single event of the victim creation to get more benefit for longer term and other types of acts.
And most of the time, the individual is clicking on wouldn't know what's just happened and won't find out about it.
There's plenty of malware out there that will affect you without you being informed.
Right. All right, so let's talk about pharming.
Pharming is a term that describes the modification of legitimate DNS to point, web traffic from one server to another. DNS, domain name services, is essentially a service on the internet that relates a domain name to an IP address. Since everything on the internet is based on IP address numbers, we need names to be able to type up the address. Right. It's the same idea as a phone book, right? You look up a person's name, and once you have their name, you can find their phone number, for those of us older than 30. With pharming, you're essentially attacking the DNS infrastructure for a legitimate website and then gaining access to that server, modifying the DNS record so that the legitimate traffic goes from the right site to the wrong site. There was an event several years ago where individuals within organizations were phished for credentials to where they manage their domain names.
Right.
And there was this big, wide push by phishers to gather this information, and then about 6 weeks later, they changed the DNS of all the domains in all of these accounts to point to a server in Ukraine. But one of the domains that was in that batch was a domain from a company that did online check processing for a lot of major institutions.
Right.
And so all their traffic was going to a server in the Ukraine. It's a simple thing, right? The account that manages the domain name, they changed the DNS address to point to a different server. Unfortunately, at the time, that server wasn't doing anything. Plenty of people did tests on it, and there was nothing malicious happening.
Right.
I don't think that the bad actors knew what was going on at the time.
They knew what they had.
And what they had,
right.
Exactly. But it's scary in the sense that you can think that, domain name for something that is so fundamental, like online bill paying, could be compromised and have that traffic sent somewhere else, and who knows what they can do with that traffic.
Right. So a lot of detail within that. So some of the simple things we can do to protect against that is, right, who is privacy, right, to prevent maybe hijacking in some cases, right?
Well, who is privacy just hides the email address of where you want to send your phishing attack to. But you can send it to the privatized address, and it still arrives at the person's desk who's managing it. From an organizational standpoint, you need to make sure that there are safeguards in place, just like we did with the whale phishing and the other social engineering tactics with executives and such, as those in IT organizations that have control over domain names and critical infrastructure. There should be policies and procedures in place that require multiple eyes on something before change is made or before information is given to a third party that provides access to that information.
Very good. So I wanted to sort of change tack a little bit and just talk about, LookingGlass. Obviously, we work for LookingGlass, and we have a lot of these sort of retail-related services with regards to phishing detection and takedown and things like that. But there is also a perimeter device sort of protection that organizations can put in place. We are one of those companies that can do that sort of protection, where we're working on score and rule-based systems of correlation of internal network traffic with threat intelligence and putting that together in a more automated way to protect. So you can take in, feeds of phishing that we've identified. We talked about that, or malware, and correlate that and essentially protect your organization to the perimeter. So definitely would like to encourage those of you that are more at an enterprise level, they're looking at the bigger picture. We have this dynamic threat defense product, which is a combination of a number of our products to solve these sorts of problems, and from an architecture point of view, not necessarily the human element, because we are the weakest link, but to try and protect an organization from those types of threats at the enterprise level. Again, companies like us help with that as well. So let's go into some predictions. So again, tongue-in-cheek, I mean. Let's talk about the next couple of months, right? Let's keep it simple. We've got some threats coming, don't we, Greg?
Well, in the U.S., we have Thanksgiving. It's a huge threat.
And I'm very sleepy after that.
Well, sleep deprivation probably aids in the falling for phishing attacks.
Yeah. Don't go online after eating a turkey, is what we're saying.
Well, yeah. And, so one of those social engineering tactics is, the idea of getting something really special, right, if you act now. We've been trained by advertising on TV. Now, call now, get 10% off. Hurry, don't wait, time's running out. Black Friday, around the end of November, with online shopping deals and coupons and people lining up to stores, at midnight in order to be first in line to get a great deal on a DVD player. It's a ripe environment for getting people to fall for scams. Same thing around the holidays, looking for those deals, looking for those discounts off of shopping, extra gift cards. Anything they can do to cut down the cost of buying presents for others. They'll give up all kinds of information for that.
Yeah. Well, and obviously in the interest of time, I mean, again, anytime we have a storm or a major event, right, there's the charity scams that are out there, typically phishing attacks and scams around that. Obviously, as you said, the Black Friday, sort of shopping holidays with Christmas coming up. And again, APWG mentioned that the Christmas period was one of the reasons why they saw an elevated rise in phishing over that first quarter, in relationship to retail being one of the big focuses.
And then right after you survive Christmas, you've got the whole tax season upon you, which, as everybody knows, the IRS does never, they never call you. They'll never email you. They always send letters.
Right.
Yet we get plenty of emails and plenty of phone calls from the IRS saying we have to do something.
Right.
So it's a great season for phishers to get at people, because people are really already afraid of the IRS. So they might as well act on the messaging itself.
So, I mean, the simple roll-ups here are go to the charities you already know. Stay away from these gift card programs if you can. They're just trying to collect information at best and fish you at worst. And get your taxes done early, right? Because get in before the fraudsters do.
Exactly. If you don't file your taxes, somebody else will.
So some basic helps in regards to phishing, some things that we can help recommend that might help with a traditional phishing scam is, as you'll see here, most people would look at this URL and look at the double slash on the left and read to the right, and they would say, well, that looks like a chase.com domain there, or a securelogin.com. And in reality, you actually have to go to the first single slash and read to the left. That is actually how you identify the actual name domain. So the protocol here is there's a lot of gobbledygook in there. There's lots of numbers and letters and dashes and things like that that tend to confuse us.
Yeah.
And I guess to sort of stimulate your thinking there, if you see a URL, let's go to the single slash and read to the left.
Yeah, I mean, your average consumer doesn't understand all of the components in the official URI spec of what these URLs look like. Being able to make long domains like this is a great way to confuse consumers, because people just read from left to right in Western countries, and they see the first thing that they recognize and they just stop.
Yep.
Right? And on a desktop, it's hard enough. When you're talking about mobility, it's even worse.
Right.
You don't even have as much of a screen to be able to look at the entire URL. You have slim to no chance of recognizing that URL as being not legitimate.
Got it. So let's talk about LoRa emails. Typically, you mentioned early on that typically we get the email and it has a link in it. What can we do there?
Most modern email programs will allow you to hover over a URL and your screen will pop up the URL that's underneath the link, the cosmetic text that you see. So you'll be able to hover over links, and you can use your mouse to do that, and you can see what is underneath that URL. Where will you go when you actually click on it? And if you notice that URL is different than the one that's being printed on your screen, a dead giveaway that you should be taking a second to breathe again and to confirm what's going on. But again, if you're looking at an email message with a mobile device or a tablet, there's no hovering.
Right. So if you are on a computer and they don't match, that's a good indicator.
Right.
Good.
Better safe than sorry. Don't click.
And the last one is, again, it's a big one. It's back to your count to 10 and take a breath. Is that quite often when we get that text, or whether we get that email or IM or what have you, and it's asking us to do something urgently, and we don't expect it, you can take a lot of the content, maybe a paragraph, couple of sentences, and cut and paste that into Google, and quite often you'll find in many business as well as personal scams, but they're listed, right? I got mugged in London is a scam that's well noted out there, but if you've got somebody who's traveling and you don't know where they went and you get that, suddenly it's about you, and you don't take that moment to cut and paste it into Google and just look and say, oh yeah, this language has been reported many, many times.
Absolutely.
So again, I think a lot of these sort of scams, social engineering scams, have been used before. Very rarely you're the first, can happen, but even if it's not exactly the same, just doing that process will get your suspicion level up. And if you see, hey, a scam like that, with language like that, is out there on Google, maybe you'll step back.
Well, and the great idea about taking that time to do that is you're actually stopping and taking a breath. You're not acting. So by doing the work to confirm, you're taking that extra time to think about what's going on.
Excellent, great, thank you. So the Department of Homeland Security has got October is the National Cyber Security Awareness Month. We've got a couple of tips for those of us that have listened in.
Keeping your machine clean, right? Keep your operating system updated. Keep your applications patched. Make sure you have antivirus software installed and keeping that updated. Those are all vital, right? So just start with a basic clean machine. You also want to protect your private information. And we talked about, going to fill out surveys or to sign up for gift cards and all that stuff. How much information are you giving away? Where is that information living beyond the holiday season?
Yeah, and what's the benefit, right?
And really, what are you getting out of it? The more private information you're giving out to others, the greater likelihood that information is going to be used against you in the future.
Connect with care.
Yeah, connecting with care, right? Know where you're going. Looking at your banking website like we talked about with the man-in-the-middle attacks. Know what the login... Right? I'm sorry?
Bookmark them.
Bookmark it. You can bookmark, but know what those pages look like.
Right.
Understand what that normal process flow is, and if it changes, be suspicious, right? So make sure you're connecting to places with intentionality.
Yeah, get the legitimate app, right? Go to the bank. It'll tell you to go back to an app store and get it through a legitimate app store. Right?
Exactly. Be suspicious. You don't have to be fearful. This is a big one, right? And it involves taking that time to step back and think about what you're doing. And it's okay to be suspicious about legitimate things. Yeah, it's not good to be fearful. We're not here to live in fear. We're here to be productive, to get our work done. It's good to transact online. It's good to be efficient. But it's also good to be suspicious and wonder where you're connecting, wonder who you're talking to. When you get a message from somebody, question where it comes from, double check it, put your sneakers on, go down the hallway, and that's the last one, right? Use SneakerNet. If you're in a workplace and you're getting urgent information from others that are an authority figure in your workplace and you don't think it's right because now you're suspicious, put your shoes on, go down the hallway and ask. Right? And never be afraid to ask a question to do the right thing.
Great. Thank you, Greg. So lastly, we just want to touch on, for those of you that may have interest in some products that we have here and services, we have a phishing URL feed, right? If you want to plug that into a perimeter device to help try and protect your organization from phishing, we detect URLs and essentially can feed that to you to help protect your organization. We also do a phishing detection, so based on brand or products that you have that you want to protect where your brand may be used as part of that phishing attack, we can detect that for you, report that and alert that to you so you can make a decision about what you would like to do. And if what you'd like to do is take that site down to protect your customers, we're certainly here to help with that as well with our response service. So all things that Greg Ogorek here runs and helps protect organizations like you every day. So again, thank you very much for being with us, Greg. Really
Thanks for having me.
appreciate your time and walking us through that, educating it. Certainly, again, if you're interested, reach out to LookingGlass. We have a number of how to contact us through social media, through our website. You can get information about our DDT product or in regards to phishing or our feeds. Again, we do a lot here and certainly like to talk to you and help you any way we can in regards to cyber. So again, thank you for joining us for the National Cyber Security Awareness Month presentation about phishing. Thank you.